Thank you everyone for joining us again to our first session. Following the broader context which was set on our plenary session, we now move into the first session of this conference, which will focus on specific trade, tourism, and investment opportunities arising from India's economic growth. This session brings together industry leaders and policymakers to share their valuable experiences and explore future business potential with India. We will also address both opportunities and challenges that comes with growth. I would now like to introduce our esteemed panelists for this session as they make their way onto stage. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Hasitha Premaratne, Managing Director, Brandix Lanka Limited, Mr. Shalin Balyasuriya, Co-founder and Group Director, Spa Salon Ayurvedi Wellness, Mr. Ravi Dadlani, Managing Director and CEO at Siat Kelani Holdings Private Limited, Mrs. Renuka Veerakon, Director General of the Board of Investment Sri Lanka, Mr. Hishan Singhawansa, Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Chief Operating Officer of Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. This session will be moderated by Mr. Shamindra Kulammange, co-founder of Echelion Media. Thank you. And once again, I would like to remind that you can access Slido using the QR code in the badge that has been provided to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful to see you here this morning. I think the morning session provided us the perfect segue. And I was talking to the panel a little while ago, and I was suggesting that some of the themes have been relevant in this discussion for the last 2 decades. And our challenge will be to not dwell on the theme. The opportunity is abundantly clear. But we've got a panel with diverse exposure to the Indian opportunity. So our challenge here, and this is to the panel, is to see how we can elevate this conversation, how we can bring new ideas, fresh thinking, particularly to what we can achieve in the short to medium term with the opportunity. As was discussed in the morning, the Indian opportunity is quite large. There's a growing middle class. India aspires to be the next great manufacturing hub and a supply chain center. It is a significant source for FDI to Sri Lanka already and can potentially grow that role. It is also Sri Lanka's top tourism source. So I think we've got a fantastic opportunity, a fantastic panel, a great diversity. For those of you who don't know the panel, Shalin is co-founder of Spa Salon. Hishan is Deputy CEO at Cinnamon Resorts. Hasitha is Managing Director at Brandix, one of Sri Lanka's largest apparel manufacturers. Renuka heads the investment board here in Sri Lanka, and Ravi is CEO of Siat Kelani, one of India's largest investments in Sri Lanka. So I will ask each of you to take a minute to capture for us, a minute or two, to quickly put 1 or 2 opening remarks on the table. I will ask you to start, Renuka. We'll go to Ravi and then to this side of the table. And then we'll get into a discussion.
Yep, thank you. Of course, as you said, as has been reiterated in the morning as well, India is a huge player for Sri Lanka in terms of the potential we have being the big brother next door to us. And I think over the centuries we've been having the ties with them. For the BOI and for the country, India has been the second largest investor to date. We have cumulative investments of over 2.3 billion that has come in from India. We have over 200 projects that have been taken off under the BOI itself. We're sitting in one of them, so you can see the scale of investments that have come in and which is going to help the country, particularly now with the tourism boom, how this infrastructure is going to help the country, help us to generate revenue and create opportunities, not only for economic-wise, but in terms of employment generation. So looking at the portfolio that we have at the BOI, we have the diverse sectors that have come in with us in infrastructure, in agriculture, manufacturing, which covers so many sectors like the pharma and food industry, et cetera, so it's a huge pipeline of projects and portfolios that we have, and we see these numbers growing. I mean, over the last year, we have over 300 million pledged already, particularly in a growing sector that is just opened out, the mineral sector. So there's huge potential, and I think we need to really take this on to see how we can see the policy gaps that are hindering more investments to come into Sri Lanka. I'd like to talk about it as we go along. So the opportunities, I mean, I don't need to say, it's huge, it's enormous, and we really need to capture that.
Ravi, can I ask you for some opening remarks?
Yeah, so thanks. I would also resonate with Renuka in that sense, because we've been in Sri Lanka for the last 34 years from a manufacturing perspective, the tire company that I represent. And we have also just committed to another large investment for a buyout of a company in Sri Lanka. So from a perspective of India looking towards Sri Lanka, I think the potential is great. There are areas that we can focus on, and I think if we just link up to the thought process that India would want to make India a manufacturing hub, and from where we could sort of tag on or reach out to them, this opportunity is available. There are niche areas, probably opportunities that would come up, like the one that I would talk about as we go. And I think our experiences in Sri Lanka have been immense. Learnings have also been immense. And I think if we take that and communicate that message to India, there is a lot of opportunities for bringing Indian investors back into Sri Lanka.
Right, thank you. Hasita, if you don't.
Yeah, thank you, Shamsi. So first of all, I think there are two sides from my experience. One is being in India and producing in India as a manufacturer. And secondly, of course, exporting to the Indian market. So there are two, three important aspects I would like to touch. First of all, what India brings to the table is a scale, be it manufacturing resources or be it the market size. Obviously, that scale is something that a country like Sri Lanka will have to ride, as the topic itself says, that we're riding that wave, because with our 22 million people, we cannot simply create that scale that is needed for any business to go beyond. So for example, when Brandix was only a Sri Lankan company or Sri Lankan manufacturing base way back in 2005, one of our key customers came and said, if you want to grow in this category beyond this point, Sri Lanka is capped. You can't grow beyond this. But if you go to India, because at that time, they had a large exposure in China. If I recall correct, about 70% of the product came from China at the time in 2005. So they said, we want to reduce this significantly, and India will be an important market. If you set up in India, we will give you the business. And that's exactly what we did. We went there, started off with that particular customer, and then grew from zero to export almost $300 million worth of apparel today from India. So in that journey, I think if we had sat in Sri Lanka and said we want to be in Sri Lanka and do whatever, we would have been in an islander mindset with about half of the size of the business that we are today. We are $1 billion plus company today. We wouldn't have crossed 500 million if we were only in Sri Lanka. But because we went overseas, we were able to headquarter our business in Sri Lanka, do our product development, design, sales, procurement, and some of these white-collar value-added jobs from Sri Lanka as the headquarters, and then use the regional resources and scale up and also mitigate the country risk that we have in Sri Lanka. So that's number one, right? That's the opportunity that we were able to capitalize through this journey in India. The second part of it, which we haven't been able to do yet, but we are trying to do, is the entry into the Indian retail market, which is, as we all know, like you said, many forums have spoken about how the middle and the upper segment of the Indian market, almost more than 300 million plus people, more than the US population almost, is that number. So essentially, the opportunity there is huge. The brand consciousness is coming in, and there is a lot of, the disposable income is increasing. But as we know, the opportunity, while it's significant, on the other side, the challenge is also that the price is not going to be easy, right? It's a very competitive, challenging price point that you need to deal with, and you're dealing with different types of suppliers coming from different segments, compliance standards and some of the other things that we cherish in Sri Lanka versus some of those expectations that may not necessarily be the same. So how do we kind of adjust and unlock these opportunities? The key opportunity is there, like you said, there is no doubt about it, but really unlocking that is not being easy. I'll talk maybe more later on, because there are some specific areas that currently the industry is working on to unlock, but unfortunately or fortunately, there are still a lot of work to do, as we are not even maybe 5 to 10% of the journey there.
Right, fantastic segue, Hasida. Hisham.
Thanks. So from a tourism point of view, I think I'll give some, the whole country is talking about the low-hanging fruit of tourism as a growth engine for the economy. We've seen good growth over the last year, 2024 versus 23, and this year looks very, very promising. I think India is the main component of driving it. Just to get some color, I know we're talking about this opportunity for a long time. India is the #1 source market for Sri Lanka, and I think looking at what India can do for us, I mean, if you, just to kind of pull back a little bit, Sri Lanka as a tourist destination is very, very small compared to global destinations. We are at peak, we did about 2.3 million tourist arrivals. Compared to a country, small island like Bali gets 6.5 million tourists. So we have long way to go, and India will be that growth engine. From India, outbound travel, like you mentioned earlier, it's about 30 million now this year. It's picked to grow to about 80 million by 2040, almost tripling. So if we get about 1-2 million of that, that's a big impact on this economy. So potential opportunities much greater and much faster, I believe, for tourism and from India. And what we've seen is, as a destination, also we've kind of changed from pre-pandemic to now. We've always talked about pre-pandemic levels to now numbers and how the revenue generation capacity as an industry. If you look at cinnamon numbers, if I talk about cinnamon, since November, we've been kind of beating the RevPAR, we call it the revenue per available room numbers. That indicates good revenue growth. So it only bodes well if we can really supercharge this. So I think the key focus for the industry is to really supercharge this growth, give that kickstart vis-a-vis promotional campaign to really drive Indians to come. And I think the other factor that I'll talk about a little later is the question for tourism is, it's not a matter of if tourists will come, about 4 million tourists we expect to come over the next 3-4 years. It's how and what we need to do to get ready for it as a country, as an industry. So that's the conversation I'll get into a little later in terms of what are the things that we need to do.
Brilliant. You mentioned RevPAR is beating expectations. So this is your own budgeted expectations or 2018 numbers?
2018 numbers. So we measure against the pre-pandemic levels. So those indices have moved up.
Sure.
I know there's a narrative in the country saying that we get a different type of tourist now versus what we used to get. Europeans used to stay longer versus Indians stay shorter. But as a destination, I believe Sri Lanka is big enough to cater to everyone. We have to be that broad-based church kind of approach. We are not a small destination like Maldives or Seychelles to limit tourists. So we have long way to go.
Shalin.
Yes, so I think one of the differences from the panel, the perspective I can give is we are B2C. So we're a direct-to-consumer brand. We've been in India for a while, and just to give you an idea of what the potential is, everyone knows about potential, but in our industry, 2030, the Indian beauty market is expected to be at $5,000 billion. That's a crazy number. And imagine just having a sliver of that pie, which is the way we look at India. So looking at India, there are also a lot of opportunities being a brand out of Sri Lanka, because being Ayurveda brand as well, they understand the ingredients, they understand Ayurveda. So when we speak the language in our storytelling, because when you start going direct to consumer, it's about building brand, it's about telling stories, it's about people understanding what you're trying to sell. There is that advantage. They do understand the value of Ayurveda, they do understand our ingredients, and that is helpful. Yes, it's a very competitive landscape, but if you weigh in where we stand in terms of the luxury Ayurveda brands in India, on a global scale, we've actually beaten the Ayurveda brands in India to become the largest luxury Ayurveda brand in the world. But within India, one of the brands are bigger than us. So that is the potential that India holds and we see. What is also interesting for direct-to-consumer brands is how the digital marketing and the digital selling or the e-commerce has grown in India. From its e-commerce to its quick commerce, it's thriving, which means your segmenting becomes easier, your marketing becomes relatively cheaper because you can really segment and market to them. The social media usage and the market penetration from that end becomes a little easier, so you no longer have to rely on mass market channels, which cost way more. So there is a lot of opportunity there in the direct-to-consumer market, which very little Sri Lankan brands have tapped into. If you look at Amazon US, there are more Sri Lankan brands selling on that than we are selling in India. So this is, I think, an area we should really start looking at. Because in terms of building brands, the conversations we can have with our consumers are going to be far more understandable in that context, and we can leverage a lot there.
Right. Thank you very much for those thoughts. Let's just a reminder to the audience, if you scan that QR code on your entrance badge, you can submit questions to Slido. We've already got several questions. We can keep this discussion interactive if we have your questions early on. So when we see something relevant, we can just put it to the panel and we happen to be discussing the same thing. So please do that. I do indulge all of us. Let's have a great discussion. Renuka, I'll come to something you mentioned in passing there. You suggested that $300 million in Indian FDI were signed up in 2024. Can you give us kind of an overview of Indian FDI in the overall Sri Lankan investment landscape, particularly in reference to FDI that helps us tap into global supply chains? You know, the surest way to tap a global supply chain is to have FDI in that area, right? In that context, can you sort of paint the picture for us on FDI currently?
Sure. So the 300 I spoke about was over the last year that we have got the applications in. And if you look at, I mean, we have all the larger infrastructure projects that have come in from India, like the tourism sector. And if you look at the West Container Terminal, then we have the bigger players like IOC, Indo-Ocean, again, infrastructure. But the recent trend has been, again, supply chain, where the mineral sector plays a major role. We also have companies that are doing component manufacturing, who are into pharma, that is going out of the country. So there is a huge link in the products that are being manufactured here, gearing towards the supply chain activities that are required by the worldwide industries. Paint, for example, is another one that, again, it's going out from Sri Lanka. But having said that, I see that we may need to look at new policy changes that may be required in certain sectors, like mining, for example, which didn't really take off up till now because of the not having a clear policy and how to take it forward. So at the moment, we have some kind of a policy direction, so we are able to move that sector. But there are many sectors that due to a lack of a proper guideline or policy directives, that we are kind of hindered. So especially since we want to position Sri Lanka as a +1 to India, we need to unlock all these blocks that we are having. If I can just mention, like in the entertainment sector, I mean, we've opened out new areas. But when you look at the laws, very vital things like that are needed for entertainment, which I just spoke to one of the members here, that company is struggling because in the liquor licenses that I issued, this particular category doesn't fit in. So all here too, it has been only for restaurants, hotels, etc. But if I may say, if you look at a casino, that particular HSO, that particular numbering is not there to permit a casino to have a liquor license. So now we have opened out for casinos, but we are not geared to cater to that. So which is very frustrating from an investor's point of view. And to get the bureaucracy to work fast to meet the timelines of an investor is very important. So I think those are areas that we really need to focus on when we open out a new sector, that we have everything in place to make sure that things are streamlined, that the investor can take off according to their timelines.
Given the vantage position you have, and you are an interface between investors and policymakers, if you looked at the 2 or 3 biggest opportunities Sri Lanka now has in unlocking, the sort of +1 kind of investments that you talked about, or the investments that will link Sri Lankan companies to global supply chains or Indian supply chains in this instance, what would those big wins be? I mean, the so-called low-hanging fruit, what would those be in terms of policy change?
Yes, so we really need to have our import-export streamlined, because some products would need licensing, not only in by import-export, but maybe if it's in the pharma sector, it would be an MRA. There are a host of other agencies that you need to get licenses from. So there again, there is no standard time frame that is given that an investor would know, okay, I would get my license in 12 days or 1 month. I mean, for an investor, what they always tell us is it's not so significant the number of days, but the certainty that even in 1 month that they would have it. So that is where we need to go to be able to get the other agencies to pledge that on a certain given time frame that an investor can expect their approvals, their permits to be given out. So we are working towards that. It is quite an uphill task, but we have started on that process where we want to get a commitment from respective agencies for the areas that they are responsible for, that we get a pledge from them, yes, this is the time, the maximum time that we would take, so that we in turn can assure an investor, okay, within this time you would be able to get your license and start your work.
There is on the statute a new law, the Economic Transformation Act. I'm wondering how far that law goes towards helping eliminate the bottlenecks that you're talking about. Is there an answer there, or partial answer there?
What I find is it is a piece of legislation, but when it comes to the practical scenario, it would be each of these agencies again that are going to be entrusted with giving whatever approvals that are required. It's not like it's going to be taken over into one entity, which would not be practical given the diverse areas that are covered, because you would need expertise in each of them. So I would say the fastest would be to get into an arrangement with each of the agencies where they would pledge the timelines, which we have actually started to work on, where we have cut down timelines, like even for EIAs, where the CE has been in agreement to bring it down. That buy-in would be necessary, because I doubt that through a piece of legislation it would be able to be implemented, because on the ground it will be the officials again who will be handling this.
Sure. Hasita, if I can bring you in, you referred in your opening remarks to the 2005 investment that you made in India. I think this was an apparel manufacturing park of sorts in the state of Orissa. Andhra Pradesh, sorry. Okay, and what's your experience been? Now, you've been there for 20 years nearly. What's your experience being versus supplying the Indian market? You talked about the opportunity there, supplying the Indian market out of the facilities you have in Andhra Pradesh. So this is an apparel park where you have made investments in facilities, plus you have joint ventures, and there are third parties also operating there. What's your experience being supplying out of there to the Indian market versus your opportunity or experience supplying from Sri Lanka into India?
Yeah. So first of all, experience is not good, right? Simple answer. The reason is we went as a special economic zone. Special economic zone means in India, when at the time they established like our BOI zones, private sector to come in and set up their own kind of infrastructure, where government gave support up to the point of the doorstep of your acreage, and then inside the infrastructure you're supposed to develop. That was the mandate. And special economic zone is seen as another country, right? Basically, if you are selling from a special economic zone to the Indian domestic market, you can sell, but the duties apply as if you're selling from another country. So that's one of the biggest challenges we had right through the period, and that's why my simple answer to your question was it was not a positive line, because naturally we went into a SEZ with a view of exports. Now the export side, just before I talk about the local sales, the export side of the work happened quite well, to be honest, right? Because the whole special economic zone concept was built for exports, where you were allowed to import anything you want duty-free, and there was a fairly green channel that allowed you to do that without too much of bureaucracy involved. So as a result of that, we were able to do a fairly good job in terms of bringing certain imported raw materials and manufacture in India and export. So for that model, SEZs were quite effective, right? But lately, as we saw the Indian domestic market growing and the opportunity coming in, we had to look at the way in which we can change this as a special economic zone to operate what we call as a domestic tariff area, right? That is a normal standard operation in India will be in a domestic tariff area where if you use the local raw material, make the product, you can sell to the Indian domestic market duty free. So lately we have converted part of our land into domestic tariff area, and now actually we are getting into the ground to see how our factories, one factory has been already converted and more to be converted, and now we are opening up the door. So with this movement, we will be able to sell duty-free to the domestic market with the local raw material being purchased. So that's the story on the domestic sales from India. From Sri Lanka, I think my friends from the Joint Apparel Association is also seated here. We have a challenge because of the duty again being capped. The duty-free access to the Indian domestic market is only up to 8 million pieces of apparel at the moment in the current free trade agreement. Now, 8 million pieces means even if you sell 2 socks, that's counted as 2, right? So simply you will have to manage your export number very carefully, and maximum you can do at about $40 million for that 8, and that is being very consciously allocating that 8 million quota among the high-valued apparel. You can get to a $40–50 million at best, and that's peanuts in the context of the Indian market size, right? So that's where I think we've been working over the years to see how to either increase that cap or at least allow, because one of the another things that happens is that Sri Lanka imports about $800 million worth of fabric from India, right? So Indian mills sell to Sri Lanka about $800 million worth of fabric, and then we use that and mostly export it back to other parts of the world. So our request on the second line was to say, at least for what we import from India, the fabric that we import, let us use that, manufacture here, and sell it back to India duty-free, which I thought we had good response on that front until recently, the negotiations. But lately, the challenge has been that I think currently we don't have a negotiator from Sri Lanka to take charge that FTA conversations and go back. So I hope that they'll be addressed very soon. and we'll be able to restart these conversations, because moment the FTA sets a better limit, I think we will be up there. And I have to tell that that's 8 million quota now. I think if you look at this year, the way it's going, by half year, it will be over.
8 million pieces.
8 million pieces will be over half year, or even earlier.
Ravi, so what's your experience been? So obviously there's stuff to be worked out in Sri Lanka about its access to India as far as apparel is concerned. You are in manufacturing of a different sort. What's your experience as an Indian investor in Sri Lanka been?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we've had the benefit of both worlds. We've had a very good experience in Sri Lanka. We've been here for 32 years. And we primarily set up the operations in Sri Lanka was for the purpose of catering to the Sri Lankan market. But we also had a dual benefit, is the fact that we are also a BOI company of a plant set up in Kalutara, for which we were using to enter into markets internationally. And how it worked for us was, until about 3-4 years ago, we were having a rocking time sending products back to India through the FTA, and we had multiple advantages. One was that product quality, because of the rubber that we get in Sri Lanka, turned out to be as good or better in some cases. Our freight cost to Chennai was 1/3 of the cost from, let's say, our plants in Maharashtra or Gujarat coming into Chennai, so we had that advantage. We had a 9% benefit on the FTA, so we utilized it, and we were doing quite well. I mean, till about 3-4 years ago, when again a change with India booming and expanding, we saw our parent company set up shop in Chennai. They opened their plant about 3.5 years ago. So we had to all of a sudden vacate a market, or we found it difficult. I think, like Hasid said, we had a problem in ensuring that we compete in terms of pricing. It's not easy to compete with the economies of scale of India. Again, for a comparison purpose, I will share this with you. The CH Sri Lanka operations manufacture 90 tons per day production and have a 45% market share in Sri Lanka. And our parent company in India, which has only a 13% market share in India, produces 1,400 tons a day. So we are 1/14 of the scale of India and have a large 45% market share, whilst India has only 13. So the point that I'm trying to make is that the scale makes a massive difference. So for us, entry into or continuing servicing markets of that nature have become concerns. But what we have done subsequently, that there are potential markets that we could service again through our parent company in India or otherwise, where India has no access to. It was mentioned in the morning that whether Sri Lanka could be a base to service Pakistan, and that's exactly what we have started doing. So we've seen some markets shutting down, but some markets opening up. Bangladesh is also one such market. Again, there was an opportunity for CEAT India to set up in Bangladesh, but they exited that opportunity, and we have created that opportunity for ourselves from Sri Lanka.
So I'm curious how you can reconcile your statement at the outset when you said you're looking at a huge buyout of a Sri Lankan rubber tire manufacturer. What's the opportunity? What are you playing for here?
Yeah, so I think this fits in with the not company philosophy, but the India philosophy of saying they want to make manufacturing hub to be a manufacturing hub to the world. Now, we had an opportunity of looking at a buyout of another company in India, or even looking at Sri Lanka. And with the experiences that we have had of the joint venture here, plus the transition of technology from India to Sri Lanka, an opportunity did arise. It's in progress. We have not taken over the plant as yet, but we have made a commitment. I think Renuka is aware of this. We've had this chat. We have committed $225 million buyout of a company in Sri Lanka. Now, the point that we need to know is there are such niche opportunities that will come. There are such niche opportunities that we can bring investments into Sri Lanka. But again, whilst we say this, it's something unique. And sometimes the policies that we have in place or policymakers grapple with something new that has happened. So we will have to, make progress, discuss how, why, what we need to do. So we are also talking of a lot of changes that we don't need done. But Sri Lanka had not experienced this before.
Hishan, if I can come to you, you mentioned that Sri Lanka's tourism product has changed. You used the word changed in the last 5 years. So you're referring to 2018 to today, right? Can you tell us what you mean by that at first, right? And how does that change, positive or negative, impact the Indian travel or tourism opportunity?
Yeah, so when I spoke about change, I think if you look at the mix of tourists who are coming to the country 2018 versus 2024, 25, what we project, I'll take a little piece of that, which is Colombo. As all of you can see, Colombo has changed since 2018. We are here at ITC. Cinnamon built Cinnamon Life as City of Dreams, the largest private sector investment in this country. We have global brands right now in Colombo, which were not here 5-6 years ago, from Marriott to other big brands. So that shows the confidence that global brands and investors have in Colombo as a destination. In 2018, if you look at the arrivals, were actually higher to the country, but Colombo room night occupancies, we track how many room nights were occupied in Colombo versus 2024 with lesser arrivals, was much more. It was about almost 25% more in Colombo. So that's an indication of the change in the tourism mix. We see a lot of that impacted by more Indians coming into the country. Plus, we see Colombo is changing as a MICE destination, as a conference destination. So that's an opportunity I think all of us have, and we need to kind of take advantage of. And now we can cater to that. We can compete with big cities like Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Dubai, in competing for this business. Out of India, the MICE travel is huge. Out of the 30 million I spoke about, they estimate about 20-25% of that volume is MICE going out of India. And if you look at India, the advantages we have versus other countries. Visa-free is a big advantage we have. Now I know Bangkok and Vietnam had opened up, but a place like even Dubai and Singapore, Sri Lankans get visa-free, but Indians don't. So that's an advantage we have to kind of really tap into that market. And if you look at the nuance around growth in India, the southern states are growing much faster than the northern states. And we are closer to the southern states, and that's an opportunity we have. Really, conferences, trying to coordinate within India versus coming out, Sri Lanka will become a much better destination as a city, as an overall destination. So that's the opportunity I feel we really need to kind of, at a next short term, that's a big opportunity that we need to really take advantage of.
You need to, in your role, consider the yield you get from tourists, be they Indian, European, or Eastern European, right? How do you see the Indian opportunity in that sense? How do you maximize yields? What sort of mix do you go for to maximize yields?
So I feel it's a demand and supply situation. Overall, as a Colombo market, if you look at Colombo as a destination, last year we were about 50-55% occupancy in Colombo. But when occupancies move up beyond 70%, the rates will move up. As a destination, if you compare against, like I said, KL, Bangkok, Singapore, Dubai are a little higher, we are still very affordable. Our 5-star rates and in Colombo are, if you compare in India, the rates are much cheaper. So we are very attractive, and our rates can move up, and the yields will move up when the demand starts coming in. And India is a big market, and like I earlier said, we should attract everyone across the board within that big pyramid. And there'll be people coming at lower to middle to higher end, And as a destination, we can offer all of it. We are not a small island. We are a big island comparatively. So we have multiple destinations within the country. So definitely, yields will move up. We have opportunity to move up. Globally, rates have moved up in every major city except Colombo. So that's a trend to kind of see we are catching up. Once the occupancies move up, yields will move up.
Shalin, can you talk to us about your experience as a single brand retailer into India? You are in the beauty and wellness space. You preface that by suggesting the Indian beauty and wellness market is $500 billion, right, currently. What's Spa Ceylon's experience been like in India? And there's also this question you can address, how widely is Spa Ceylon dispersed in or available in India?
Okay, the Spa Ceylon experience in India has been tough. The ease of doing business in India is not that great, I'll give you that. Because even getting shipments in, getting things cleared, there's an approval process for cosmetics which can take anything from 3 months to 6 to 8 months. And when you have a large number of SKUs, that's a big cost and a time, and you can't put a clock on it, which is a problem. Even on a retail footprint, there are difficulties. So just to be clear, there's a lot of difficulty working in India. But the size is too large to ignore it. And that is why we keep going at it. In terms of the Indian footprint and how things have changed, post-COVID, our approach to India, like most parts of the world, was a brick and mortar kind of approach like we do in Sri Lanka as well, where we open multiple stores and there are store experiences all around. An expensive way to go about it, but we are very much an experiential brand, and we felt that was the way to go. 2 years of COVID was very difficult when you are paying rents and paying a high amount of staffing and so on. So right post-COVID, we changed and went to a purely digital kind of assortment of locations. We are working with third-party digital platforms and going after India that way for the moment, and it's proving to be quite successful. It's on one side, you are getting a wider footprint because of the geographic size of India, it's hard to get a good amount of footprint just with the brick and mortar stores, so digital gives you that. It's allowed us to segment our marketing, which has also made the marketing process more efficient and cheaper. But still, brand building is important. And I think that's something we don't look at India, and that's something even our, Sri Lanka as brands, Sri Lanka as legislation doesn't look at as well, because every time we have to go out and build brands, we are building brands in 31 countries. You have to invest in building the brand. Getting money out of Sri Lanka to build a brand right now is almost impossible. But building the brand is going to pay off, and does pay off. I'll give you an example. One of the big Ayurveda brands in India, Estee Lauder, one of the biggest cosmetic houses in the world, has come and invested in them close to 50%. They are only in India and 2 other countries. We are in 31 countries. But they are investing in them purely for the potential of India. So if you build brand in India, that's another great way of getting investment into Sri Lanka, not just for manufacturing, but for the strength of brand. But building brand means investing in it, and we need to have frameworks for doing that as well. So there is potential. It's hard, but there is potential. The market size is huge, but apart from manufacturing, apart from being the supply guy, there is potential to go out and build brand. And if you go out and build brand, then the rest of the world starts looking at you and can come and invest in you as well. So that's an area we need to start looking at, being so close to India, having the FTA on our side as well. And a lot of really good brands in Sri Lanka, and a lot of good potential in India. So that's something I think we don't look enough at.
Just to clarify, so you started your India strategy with physical stores like you do, but you now roll those back.
We've rolled them back, and now we are 100% digital. We will start opening stores again by next year. So there's a store rollout plan, including travel retail and so on. But the advantage in this is the digital infrastructure in India is so good that you can do it, which also gives you a lot of leverage to do a lot of work from this end, We have no time difference. Language is not an issue. You can market in English. There are a lot of resources you can do sitting in Sri Lanka. So that's a really good way to access India, but you must build brand.
Okay, there's a question here, and I think I'll post this to Renuka, but I'd like I like at least Hasita to weigh in on this, right? As we speak, there's a ticking clock to the 2nd of April when we're supposed to see reciprocal tariffs from the United States. There is still a lot of ambiguity around what this means, right? But I'm asking you to relate this to how we can strategize. I mean, I'm sure you're thinking about this, right? All of you must be thinking about this. How does this potentially, how are you strategizing for this? And can you relate this to then trying to open opportunities in the region, for instance? Because if those markets are more difficult to access, how do you kind of look at the region as an alternative?
Yes, so you're correct to say that we are strategizing. There is a team currently, like about 2-3 weeks, we've been meeting think tanks with the Kataruma Institute as well and the relevant agencies, departments, to see how this would impact Sri Lanka if we are to be also given the same treatment that the countries that they've already listed out. We are not in it, but then how would we face it? So, and how we can do a position paper for our ambassador in Washington to have talks with the Trade Department to see where we stand in terms of what's going to happen. But then again, it's all very premature. We really don't know how this will work out, how it will pan out. But that strategizing is ongoing. So I'd like to say that everyone's aware of it, that it's not in the back burner. It's very much out there, and we are focused on looking at how we can get over this if it does get, if Sri Lanka does get impacted. And of course this, I mean, always when there's a challenge, there's also opportunity, and we would be able to now look at other areas, other markets. I'm sure the industrialists here, the entrepreneurs would be also able to come in on this, how we could maybe take this as an opportune time to look at different markets. And how maybe Sri Lanka should get into other trade agreements, other regional agreements, especially where India is already part of, to see, because that would give us that platform to be able to engage more with India particularly. So those are areas that we are actively looking at. And I think I would also at this point like to just bring it out in the open that the BIT that we had with India, that went away in 2015. Right now we don't have a BIT with India. So all of the projects that are set up here and that our companies go and set up there are not having the protection of a bilateral investment treaty. So this was something that we took up when ECTA came up. It was to be part of ECTA. Now it's the 14th round that's going. And India, they thought it would be better to keep the BIT out of the ECTA, although that was the understanding, it would be part of it. So although ECTA is proceeding in terms of the rules of origin, the goods chapters and the other chapters, the BIT has been parked aside. So there has to be more visibility, there has to be more push to ensure that we can actually conclude a BIT early, because it would not be so much favorable for entrepreneurs from both sides, companies from both sides, because they are not covered by any investment treaty.
Sure. Hasita, in your role too, you must be considering the impact of any reciprocal tariffs from the US, because, I mean, while Renuka is right in highlighting that Sri Lanka hasn't been singled out here, India has been mentioned. How do you navigate, how do you plan to navigate what could potentially arise in a few weeks?
Yeah, so I think that's a very tough question, though you say in a few weeks. It looks like,
I think it's a week,
that
right?
morning you might not know anything, right?
Yeah.
Whether it will happen or not. But the main thing is that there are few countries which probably are going to be in the top of the list, right? So good news is Sri Lanka is not in the top of the list. I think India is also not top of the list. There is China, Mexico, Canada, even Vietnam for that matter, and there is a bunch that are likely to get impacted more than the others for sure. And then you'll have the next list. So probably India might be in that next list. Sri Lanka might fall thereafter. So I think what we have to look at is in each of the locations that we are operating, how do we look at relative to the other countries who are getting impacted and see how to win the business. As a business, that's how I would look at it, right? Of course, as a country, it's a different story. But when you do that, already, so there are two parts to it. One is that the brands that we work with, they are burning their heads today thinking how not to pass on to the consumer, but how do they kind of manage this impact, if at all, between the brand and the different parts of the supply chain. So that's a big challenge at the moment. Already there are conversations around it as we speak. Even this morning there was a discussion before I came. It's not going to be easy because this industry is not a high margin industry. It's a very tough margin industry, and last couple of years we've seen even significant pressure, more pressure towards price points. So there is not much of room to play around to absorb to our margins this impact. So that's where I think the challenge will set in. So there'll be some part of the inflation in US will kick in due to this, in my opinion, but some part of it has to be absorbed by the supply chains. Where we are today, we will have to really look at how we can, as a company, we are in multiple manufacturing locations. So we are really looking at who probably can get impact, which country can get impacted more, and how do we maneuver the capacities in such a way that it will play an advantage to the corporate as a whole and enterprise as a whole. So it's about risk mitigation and how we will handle the situation. And the other part of the conversation is, like you said, in the event that India has a higher percentage of duty, again, the line of thinking probably is that it might not be like a blanket percentage for everything, but it might differ by categories and different product ranges. Already there have been certain adjustments that Indian government has reciprocated in the last few weeks, which means that there will be more adjustments that will happen soon as these type of announcements come in. I think that's the whole objective of the US camp as well, to see that, you put the number and see how the other guy reciprocates and change, and then more to get a kind of a proactive change rather than hitting the duty on before you hit, can you get something back type of thing. So my take is that it's about managing that risk and looking at how we need to play it within the margin, and there might be some impact, there might be no impact. So today we don't know because it's so volatile and uncertain.
Hishan, your position here in this panel is almost serendipitous compared to what the others are confronting, probably, because you are catering to Indian tourists in Sri Lanka. If Sri Lanka were to sharpen its product, to move up the value chain, to reach the higher yielding segments of India's middle and upper class, what does Sri Lanka need to get right about its product and about promotion to achieve that?
Yeah, so I'll start with promotion. I think that's a kind of really key thing that the whole industry is looking at right now. For last 15 years, Sri Lanka hasn't had a integrated marketing campaign, tourism campaign, or Sri Lanka campaign. Every authority has come in with a plan, and because of the bureaucracy of getting it through, it has been delayed, and when the time comes, then the authorities change. So that has been a frustration for the industry as a whole, and we've addressed with the new government as well in terms of they identify that as a big opportunity for sure, but I think the first thing that the country has to do is to really put money where your mouth is and really push Sri Lanka brand in India. We still only get a very trickle of Indian outbound, and we are at the doorstep. And what China did to most of those southeastern countries in terms of 2010s can happen to Sri Lanka very soon if you really promote it well. So that's priority number one, getting the marketing out, getting, I think rather than kind of spreading our dollars in terms of money we have, we need to really focus on the big bang for our buck, which is in India, and really push the marketing in India, which we have a good understanding of. Second part is on the kind of, before I come to the product part, I think another key factor in terms of really taking advantage of this opportunity is really getting our infrastructure around air connectivity. So Sri Lankan Airlines has to take the lead in terms of driving that. Right now we get about 165 to 170 flights a week from India, which has to almost double if we want to take advantage of it. I know Indigo and Air India investing a lot in terms of aircrafts out of India. Some of it will come to Sri Lanka for sure, but as a national carrier also, I know we have a lot of debates about national carrier and what the role is, but it has a big role to play in driving tourism. If tourism can deliver 8 billion as promised, national carrier has to play that role to really drive it. And the airport terminal, that also has to kind of get done to really really accommodate these tourists coming in. From a product point of view, definitely the industry has had 5 years of bad luck. Before COVID, we had Easter Sunday also as a tourism industry in 2019. So most of our product, other than for the brand new properties like ITC and Cinnamon Life, need an upgrade. Upgrade in terms of refurbishment. And the cash flow pressures that we've had over the last 5 years haven't given that opportunity for most of the brands and most of the owners to invest into that. So there is definitely a need to upgrade, and how the government can support it is, if you look at the construction and refurbishment cost of this country, is higher than regional peers. And we have tariff structures which are, I feel, little protective to drive those prices up. So those are opportunities we have. And looking at investment opportunities, FDIs, there are a lot of Indian entrepreneurs or Indian investors looking at Sri Lanka as an opportunity to invest into tourism. And if I think not if, when we hit 4 million tourists into this country over the next 3-4 years, we won't have enough rooms. And beyond that, we need to refurb our rooms. So that needs a concerted effort of how do you get that supply side right. And that needs real thinking around how do you supercharge that and enable investors to really come in and invest into this. To make the ROIs work, construction cost is a concern that we have to address.
Ravi, if I can bring you in, and you suggested that the availability of high quality raw materials is one reason for your optimism about Sri Lanka as a manufacturing destination for tires. What else about our Sri Lanka's investment climate is attractive? I mean, you're looking at capital, you're looking at policy, you're looking at availability of talent, and you have to compare this opportunity against India, right? Sure, the raw materials available here of high quality. What else does Sri Lanka have going for itself? And how can Sri Lanka improve its position versus those factors?
Yeah, so again, from a perspective of raw material, we have both pros and cons going. Whilst we say we have the best rubber available, rubber plantations from, let's say, 12 to 15 years ago, where we used to harvest about 140 million kilos, is now down to 80 million kilos. Okay, and we are net rubber or raw rubber importers. So whilst we say, we are conducive for investments and we want investments to come in, but this is a challenge. Now, how do we overcome it? At the moment, like in India, we have a very simple policy framework which says you can import all raw material, including natural rubber, for export. But other than the natural rubber component, we don't have any other material. So almost 75% of material, such as carbon black, bead wire, whatever we use, is all imported from either back from India or from other countries. Now, what else would work for us or what is going for us? Again, I'm going to base it on the premise that the experiences for SEAT in Sri Lanka has been superb, and that's one of the reasons that we went in for this new investment also when the opportunity did arise. Now, we also went threadbare to understand what else is going to help us. So one of the things that came out strongly was that there is some amount of political stability to be expected in the next 4 to 5 years, which we lacked at some point of time. Apart from that, we have a fantastic literacy rate in Sri Lanka, where we feel that whatever are the best practices that we can bring in from India gets adopted in Sri Lanka and fast. Now, if you went back, say, 10, 12, 13 years ago, Sri Lanka would have lacked the performance culture that we talk of, which actually comes as a practice from India. I say this because been long enough to know when I did join SEAT, what are the practices we had and what we have now. The other advantage that we feel, again, from a perspective of Sri Lanka is that we see policy or the policy framework to be in place to a great extent and discipline on it. Now, again, a little bit of a diversion from there is that whilst policy framework remains good, conducive, encouraging, we need to make sure that the consistency in this policy remains. Now, we have seen drastic changes. I'll just again give an example. The incubation period, or if you make an investment or a commitment to an investment of, let's say, $25 million, which is what we are in the process of doing. Now, by the time the $25 million matures,
or 200?
No, I'm talking of the current company that is in Sri Lanka.
Right.
The $225 million investment is completely different. We are also committing to a $25 million investment in Sri Lanka for product improvement and capacity expansion of the current JV. Now, when you commit to something like that, it takes you 18 months at a bare minimum to 24 months before it materializes and hits the road. Okay, equipment to come, set up machinery, etc. Now, in 18 months, we see every annualized national budget, we would see some policy amendments, changes. Now, we have invested or committed to invest 18 months ago. When the investments are maturing, you suddenly see things changed. So we believe that this part of it will change, or we have seen that kind of change happening where we have seen policy consistency, but you need it to be for about 4 or 5 years because what happens is the investment will take time, and then once the investment is done, by the time you start getting your payback, if the policy doesn't remain same, then you wonder why. And then again, you go back and say, our next investment, right, we will hold. So that now that's something that comes from any operating company. You talk to anyone in India, they'll first ask you, what is your ROI, or what is your payback, or what is your, EBITDA that's going to be in, say, 3 or 4 or 5 years. And once you do that working, and then you have to go back and say, no, it's changing now. That becomes a little more difficult for large Indian companies to come back into Sri Lanka and invest or keep on expanding. So that's the area I would say is that we need to probably look at.
Renuka, from the BOI's point of view, what industries or areas are you prioritizing as being opportune or perfect for attracting FDI from India into? Can you give us the rationale and the outline?
So the BOI is actually concentrating on the manufacturing sector very much, which includes a diverse area, like it could be pharma, it could be textiles. So in order to promote that thought process and implement it, the BOI has now established 2 dedicated economic zones, one for the pharma industry and another for the fabric, so that we would not get impacted, especially with the geopolitical situations. Maybe sourcing from China could be a problem in the future. If India gets into FTAs with maybe EU, we may not be able to do the accumulation by importing through India. So looking at all those scenarios, we are now actively promoting for investors to come and set up in these zones, even for the pharma industry, for APIs, so that the country would be geared, our entrepreneurs would be geared, even foreign investors who come here would be able to source their raw materials from Sri Lanka itself. So the mining industry, again, is another very big sector that we would see some form of value addition happening with the current policies that have come in. So initially it will be at a lower range, but after 2 years we expect full value addition to come in the mining sector. So those are the areas in manufacturing particularly that we are focusing on. But of course, IT and the technology space is also an area that we want to focus on, for which 2 technoparks have now been identified in Kurunegala and Galle, which again is being actively promoted to host technology-related industries or IT-related industries to come and set up. So those are 2 key areas. Of course, the bigger infrastructure projects will also be attracted because we need to, that would also support our tourism industry, our housing, and when we do have expatriates that come into the country, they would need the hotel industry, the schooling, the hospitals, so all of that in the infrastructure area is also being promoted. I would say that we have been quite successful in attracting investments from India, and we hope to actually get more investments from them. And for this purpose, we work very closely with the societies that are in Sri Lanka, like the chambers, the Indo-Sri Lanka chambers, as well as with the Indian chambers in these particular sectors. So it could be in the IT sector, it could be in the industrial sector, as well as overall chambers, to drive the focus that has been placed, because manufacturing would bring in the employment that we need to generate, but the infrastructure would be the catalyst to get people to come into the country, as well as to support the exports, as well as to support the other, the freight and things like that. So yes, those are the areas.
You have a final opportunity to submit questions on Slido. We just have a few minutes to go. We can certainly take a few questions. Hasita, one to you is that we heard about India's already negotiating free trade agreements with, for instance, the EU and several other nations. How does a manufacturer that sources fabric or raw material from India to manufacture and export to these markets, for instance, to the EU out of Sri Lanka, and you also have facilities in India itself, right? So how are you thinking about strategy, investment, and where you're going to manufacture the goods right now, given the changing landscape on free trade?
Yeah. So first of all, talking about the EU-India FTA, I think in 2011 we built a factory to thinking that the FTA with India and EU will happen in 2011, and unfortunately we are in 2025 and it still is happening, right? So I would not bet too much until it's signed. That's number one, right? But having said that, one of the other points that we'll have to look at is that we, like I said, $800 million worth of fabric imports that come to Sri Lanka today, a large portion of that get sent back, exported back to in EU under the GSP Plus scheme. As you know, the regional fabric is allowed to be used when we make the product here and export to EU for GSP Plus benefit. So some part of that or major part of that can go off, because if the EU gets into the agreement directly with India, that regional consolidation with India that we do might go off, which means that we will have obviously a fabric shortage on one side, because that 800 is a significant number in the context of our total textile use in Sri Lankan manufacturing. So then the alternates will have to come, and today, China is not an alternate because of the geopolitics and the other challenges that are going on, because most of the brands that we work with are asking or requesting us to exclude China fabric and try to use other fabrics in the context, given the geopolitics and the other challenges, especially the traceability related issues that are going through at the moment. So in that context, there will be a little bit of a challenge in sourcing the fabric for European GSP plus benefits if that comes in. So that's something that we have to look at carefully where it is coming from. And some of the Sri Lankan fabric mills are also making investments in Sri Lanka, particularly to expand the capacity. So that is something that probably will accelerate if this happen, in my view. And also, we will have to look at some of the other regional opportunities, because Bangladesh on the other side also imports a lot, and they being a least developed category, Bangladesh is allowed to export duty-free to the Europe, even if you source the fabric from anywhere else in the world. You don't have to do regional consolidations or anything like that. So in that light, Bangladesh will definitely have a better picture because they can bring from other parts of the world. So I think that to your question, number one, our fabric mills in Sri Lanka might have more opportunity and might have to expand in a competitive rate. That's the key word, right? Competitive rate, because if you can't get the fabric at the right price, then there will be a problem. So that's number one. Number two, we will have to look at also as a country where that regional consolidation can get expanded beyond India, and are there any other countries which we need to partner with to go beyond that aspect as well. That said, just one additional point I want to add to what Renuka said, because when we play in India in the local environment, what we also see is that each of the states in India compete with each other for investment, right? So if you look at, most of those states are bigger than Sri Lanka. So we have to understand that we are not even the size of a state seated here as a separate country. We'll have to also look at overall what are those dynamics that we'll have to work with, and those parameters that we need to deal with, and have that mindset, that open mindset to work closely rather than competing, but to collaborate. Most of the time the problem comes in when we talk about competition with India. There is no competition with India in my view. There is only collaboration with India. There's partnership with India. And that's the mindset change that we need to bring even in the local community here, because most of the time our conversations with either investment or FTA or anything like that will end up because we are trying to compete rather than collaborating. So my take always is that we need to change our mindset and play it a little bit differently to make this work.
Shalin, I have a question for you, and while you're taking this question, also make that your final comment, or add any final comments you have, and I'll just go around the floor here. I'll ask each of you to take maybe a minute at most on these comments. My question to you is, what advice would you give Sri Lankan brands venturing to the Indian market? Given your experience, what are the do's and don'ts? And while answering, please add anything else you wish to, finally.
Right. A key thing is to get an on-ground partner. I think that makes a huge difference. Get a partner in India who has on-ground expertise, has the strengths in India. Again, India, although it's such a large country, there's a lot of relationships that can be leveraged, and having an on-ground partner really does help. Also, there are a lot of things outside the standard frameworks that need to be addressed on a local level sometimes, and having an Indian partner changes everything. So that is a key thing. I would never want to do set up a brand in India without someone on ground there. The other side, the other big piece of advice is to, again, leverage digital, because like it was said, how state to state competes, state to state also is very different in the way they function. State to state can be different in the way you market to them as well, not just language, but in the way you market. So what's amazing is the digital landscape and how it allows you to cater to different people and talk to different people in different ways. So really leverage that when going into India. One message is not as effective as you think, and the fact that you have digital now allows you to do that. The other side is get your logistics right. Logistics into India plus logistics around India can have a huge impact on your cost structures. So find the right logistics players, figure out where to hub, Sometimes hubbing in multiple places is going to save you a lot. Sometimes importing into different ports can save you a lot. Figure out what's right for you as a brand as well. So those three things are basically what I'll tell you. And the big one is get a partner on ground.
Hishan, final thoughts. Take a minute.
So final thoughts, I think, compared to the others, I'm very, very optimistic of what India can do for us in the very immediate short term. I think the opportunity to kind of take advantage of the opportunity, we as a nation has to be proactive. Key message is to get the promotions going, get the connectivity going, make sure that our product is upgraded. One thing that I didn't speak about, that I always like to speak about, is when catering to this influx of tourists in the next 3 to 4 years, we also have this, as an industry, have a problem of enough people working in the industry. There has been a lot of migration out over the last so many years, and in industry, we also suffer from the demand out of Gulf, Middle East. So we need to also make sure that our labor force is also upskilled, and we have the pipelines going. And another big part of that is also enabling the kind of female participation in the industry. Tourism only has about 10 to 12% participation of females in the industry, so we are not unlocking 50% of the population. So that's a big narrative for us to push as a country, as an industry, to really make sure that we don't have that problem in terms of availability of people. And Colombo, last thought around Colombo, I think Colombo has the potential to be the place for Indians to come in, and the entertainment hub for Indians. And we are so close to it. We have the product now. I think what we lack is a kind of concerted effort of making Colombo that entertainment hub. We need policies like Renuka also mentioned about entertainment, getting that going, and making sure that we attract the right infrastructure into it.
Besides what you already said, Hasita, of don't look at India as a competitor, what else would you want to add? Just take a minute at most.
Yeah, so FTA, right? For me, priority number one is FTA, put the negotiation, go to the negotiation table, get the negotiator finalized, and go for it. So that's number one, because that will unlock a huge opportunity, given that it's a price-sensitive market, and without FTA, it's almost impossible to export and win in the retail market. So that's one side. The other thing, just to add on that, to give an example on compete versus collaborate, right? Whereas how I look at it is, in certain areas, there is a wave of manufacturing in India, wave of outsourcing in India, right? Especially to replicate some of the geopolitical issues between China and the US and the West, right? So then there is a massive growth opportunity that comes with it. But with that, even those companies who put the eggs in India will want a small piece of the pie outside to mitigate the risk. Maybe a 10% or 5% of that piece, if we can move here, that's a collaboration opportunity, right? If it's outsourcing environment, can we say that, okay, you put 90 in India and get 10 to us, right? That's a big opportunity. Same way in manufacturing, we can work through on the order management. So I think that's the type of collaboration that we need to go for, with a bit of a mindset change from all of us.
Right. Ravi?
Yeah, so from my side, I think one thing we may need to be very mindful of is that we did not speak about it, but that there is this thought process of a big brother phobia. We need to be mindful of that. I think that's sometimes a detriment to us driving investments, so that's one part of it. Second, I would say policymakers and government institutions probably can use the success stories of companies like SEAT, companies like Shalins, where we can communicate this to the Indian side. And what we can leverage out of India is a couple of things. One, we can bring in the best of technology transfers that you can get, which will be useful, particularly from a manufacturing perspective. You can get to create an opportunity of productivity improvements. You can create an opportunity of moving scale to Sri Lanka. So you have multiple opportunities that you can just replicate. May not be at that large amount, but yes. Again, one last example I would use is that today we manufacture about 20 kilos per man hour in India. in our plants, whilst when it was, say, about 15 years ago in Sri Lanka, we were about 4 kilos per man hour. But using India's technology and the scale that they have, we are now at about 13. We are not as much as India, but we have reached there. So I think we can tap into what the best practices available in India to make sure that we can use it in Sri Lanka.
Final words to you, Renuka.
Yes. So picking from what Ravi said, actually, our existing investors, which are over 200 in the BY portfolio alone, are our biggest ambassadors. So when we do have our promotional activities, we do draw on them to come and share their experiences in the country, and which gives the comfort to an Indian investor that their own counterparts have been here and they've been doing business well. So that, of course, is something that we do, and we're proud to say that always the sentiments have been positive. Having said that, as he also mentioned earlier, the consistency of policy plays a key role. Because, I mean, as very correctly pointed out, every budget might bring in changes in your levies and taxes. So something that we have been trying to socialize, which we have taken up with policymakers, is to have a 5-year lock-in period for investors that come into the country, so that they would know when they do their feasibilities, when they do their ROI, that they would know for a period of 5 years from the entry that things would remain static for them in terms of the levies and taxes. So this is something we are actively engaged with the policymakers to see how we can make this happen in some fashion, which would bring a lot of confidence for investors who are coming into the country. And borrowing from what Hasita said, collaboration, I think, is the key. And now we need to find out how we can leverage on collaborating more in terms of joint ventures, in terms of how we can be the source that India would need in terms of supply chain, or in terms of +1 for their other operations. So I think that would be the way forward. And Sri Lanka as a country, I think, would need to also clinch the bilateral investment treaties to be finalized at a sooner stage than later, which again would bring a lot of confidence for investors from both sides to set up operations.
Thank you, and that wraps things up, ladies and gentlemen. I think this panel deserves a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, as we conclude this session, I would really like our panelists, if they could remain on stage, please. Sorry, if you could remain on stage. And I invite Inoshini Pereira, the Director of Strategic Planning at Verité Research, to come forward and present the tokens of appreciation to our panelists. Can we please get a big round of applause for Dr. Ravi Dadlani, Mrs. Renuka Veerakoon, Mr. Shamindra Kulamanage, Mr. Hasita Premaratna, Mr. Hisham Singhawansa, and Mr. Shalem Balasuriya. Thank you, everyone.
When you're reading the news in only one language, you're only getting part of the picture. And when you're only getting part of the picture, you're losing out on the stories shaping public sentiment in Sri Lanka. This means you could be missing out on valuable opportunities or unaware of potential issues. Front Page, a product from Verité Research, pulls together headlines and stories from the 10 leading Sinhala and Tamil newspapers in Sri Lanka, summarizes them into English and delivers them to your inbox every weekday. Each issue can be read in a matter of minutes, making Front Page perfect for busy executives who don't have the time to get through one newspaper, leave alone 10. Subscription plans include individual and group packages, so organizations can make sure their employees are up to speed on the latest social, political and economic developments in the country. Front page by Verité Research. 10 newspapers in one click every weekday. Email media@veriteresearch.org for more.
Imagine the possibilities. Hayleys Advantis.